Hey guys, tonight we're taking a gentle tumble into the absolute fever dream that is medieval royalty, specifically the life of a child king. You've probably wondered what it would be like to wake up in a castle, wear a shiny crown, and order roast peacock for breakfast. Maybe you've even thought, I could totally handle that. Well, hold on to your adult orthodontics and ergonomic pillows, because being a medieval child, king wasn't just about looking cute on coins and waving from balconies. It was about surviving a shark tank without floaties and definitely without therapy. So before you get cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy this sort of thing. Leave a comment telling me your best childhood power move, or maybe just where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim those lights, put on a fan for some faux castle ambience, and wriggle into whatever position makes your spine the least angry. Maybe pull the blankets up, because tonight's topic is colder than a royal heart in a family feud. Have you ever wondered, what would you actually do if everyone bowed to you but also secretly wanted you dead? Did kings really have bottomless piles of gold? Or was it more like fighting over the last bread crust with an uncle named Geoffrey? How does it feel to have more power at age 8 than most people get in a lifetime? And more stress pimples too. Did anyone ever listen to a child king? Or did the adults just nod and then immediately do the opposite? What's it like getting your daily vitamin C exclusively from wine because your court physician thinks fruit is witchcraft? And, most importantly, what happens when your favorite toy is confiscated as evidence in a treason trial? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1382. You are a medieval child king. Your slippers are too big, the council is arguing about taxes, and your nursemaid is whispering prayers for your immortal soul. Good luck. Waking up as a child king isn't like rising gently to birdsong and soft sunlight. It's more like having 3 servants fling open your curtains while debating whether you're possessed. There's already a crisis before you've even blinked. Someone's lost a ceremonial spoon, and your royal tutor is lurking with a scroll the length of your body. Breakfast? If you're lucky, it won't still have feathers. Let's set the scene. Your bed is roughly the size of a minivan, with enough velvet, fur, and moth-eaten tapestry to keep an entire upholstery guild in business. You're somewhere between 10 and 13 years old, technically the most powerful person in the kingdom, but also a minor with a bedtime. Your mattress, stuffed with straw and the occasional crunchy surprise, is more lump than comfort. And you've learned not to question why it smells faintly of pickled onions and panic. It's cold. Not forgot to turn up the thermostat cold, but you can see your breath cold, because the castle's heating plan consists of close the window and pray. There's a thin, persistent draft that finds every gap in the wall and makes a personal attack on your toes. The only thing stopping your royal nose from freezing off is the heap of blankets, each one heavier than the last, trapping you beneath them like a very well-bred potato. You're barely conscious when the servants burst in. Medieval etiquette says you're supposed to greet them with dignity. But at this hour, your royal greeting is closer to GRMFF. They begin the morning ritual, pulling open the heavy curtains, moths scatter, poking at the fireplace. No actual fire, just a sullen pile of ashes and one very cold cat, and whispering among themselves about which saint to pray to for stubborn child kings who refuse to get up. It doesn't help that the castle is never quiet. Outside your door, there's a low-level stampede of pages, chambermaids, and courtiers all on urgent business that involves either a missing goose or a legal emergency involving a turnip. Bells clang, doors slam, and somewhere, someone is tuning a lute far too enthusiastically for 6 a.m. The medieval version of a morning alarm clock is less gentle chime and more herald with a trumpet directly to your eardrum. Your nurse hovers at the edge of the chaos, clutching a mug of something hot. For herself, not you, children get lukewarm ale. She's muttering prayers for your immortal soul. Because apparently, You mumbled something in your sleep that sounded like rebellion. Meanwhile, your tutor is already dictating the day's agenda, which seems to involve 3 hours of Latin verbs, 1 hour of how not to be poisoned, and the traditional reading of very boring chronicles, now in its 1200th installment. Getting dressed is another adventure. You're still shaking off dreams of escaping on a dragon when the dressing squad descends. They start layering tunics, shirts, doublets, and cloaks onto your sleep-addled body. There's an undercrown to keep your scalp from freezing to the gold, woolen stockings that itch like you slept in a hay bale, and shoes stiff enough to double as anti-theft devices. No one seems sure if you should look regal or just vaguely upright. And the end result is a small monarch bundled like a walking laundry basket. Breakfast is announced with the same urgency as a royal edict. The options are never comforting. Maybe it's a bowl of grey porridge garnished with last night's regret, or a piece of bread that could double as construction material. If you're very lucky, there's an egg, still suspiciously warm, and you're not allowed to ask questions. A line of servants watches you eat, nervously waiting for you to declare the meal acceptable, which is royal code for I will tolerate this until I'm old enough to order cake for breakfast. And through it all, every grown-up is glancing at you like you might say something wise and kingly at any moment. Spoiler: you're still just hoping nobody notices you drooled on your pillow. Congratulations, your day has begun, and you're already behind on your royal duties. Welcome to mornings as a medieval child king. It's less fairy tale and more sitcom, with higher stakes and a draft that never quits. You would think that, as a medieval child king, you'd be entitled to at least one thing that fits properly. Maybe a nice pair of slippers. Maybe a tunic that doesn't swallow you whole. But no, your most iconic accessory, the very thing that proves you're king and not just some highly supervised peasant, is a crown so heavy and ill-shaped, it's a miracle your neck isn't permanently stuck in a look of mild confusion. Let's talk about the crown. It's not the soft, plush kind you'd win at a carnival. No. This is an engineering marvel and a medieval chiropractor's dream job. Crafted from gold so pure it's probably worth more than your entire village, and studded with enough jewels to make a dragon feel insecure, the royal crown is less hat and more portable neck injury. Jewelers, artisans, and various important people have all had their go at it over the years, and now it's a historic, misshapen monument to everyone's bad design ideas. You sit on your grand, echoing throne, and the moment of coronation comes. Here's the thing. The crown was made for someone else, usually your father, or your father's father, or some long-gone ancestor with a particularly large head and a taste for personal branding. On your small, wobbly skull, it either slides down until it's covering your eyes, congratulations, you are now king of the darkness, or it perches precariously on top, threatening to topple into your porridge at the first sign of a draft. But tradition demands the crown, no matter how ridiculous it looks. Pages try to discreetly stuff bits of wool or velvet inside it to help it stay put, but these quickly shift, so you develop the signature child king posture. Head slightly cocked, one eyebrow raised, like you're always just about to ask if anyone has seen your dignity. The court painters do their best, but every portrait is a negotiation. Maybe we could just paint the crown floating near his head? And the end result is usually an immortalized expression of regal discomfort. The weight of the crown is both literal and metaphorical. On a physical level, it's 5 pounds of gold, silver, and let's see if he notices this extra emerald. The first time you wear it for more than 10 minutes, you get a headache that feels like someone's drumming on your skull with scepters. The pressure gives you a permanent crease in your hair. And by midday, your ears have folded over in silent rebellion. Removing the crown leaves a mark that lingers well into your afternoon lessons. There's no hiding the red, angry indent from the bishop, who tries not to laugh as he lectures you about the divine right of kings. Then there's the sweating. Crowns are not ventilated. As the hall fills with courtiers and candles and the temperature rises, the inside of your crown turns into a slow cooker for your scalp. Royal hygiene being what it is, no one thinks to clean the lining. By the end of a long ceremony, your hair smells like a mixture of old copper coins and medieval despair. You start to associate the crown not with power, but with itching, pinching, and the faint, constant fear that a gemstone might come loose and roll dramatically down the aisle. There's also the psychological effect. The crown is a symbol, a beacon of authority, legitimacy, and, unfortunately, I am the one you should poison next. Everyone who sees you in it is reminded that you are the king, but also that you are, undeniably, a child king. It's a hat that announces both your importance and your vulnerability in every glittering inch. Adults bow with a barely suppressed smile. The court jester cracks jokes about your growing into it. Even your tutor insists on referring to you as His Slightly Off-Center Majesty. It all comes to a head, literally, during the first formal dinner, when the crown, weighted by tradition and 2 extra rubies, finally slips forward and lands squarely in your bowl of pottage. The room goes silent. You pretend this is a new royal custom. It's not. But the look of horror on your advisor's face is almost worth it. And so you learn. The crown never truly fits. Not physically, not emotionally, not even as a metaphor. But you wear it anyway, because that's what child kings do. And if your neck survives until adulthood, you just might, too. Being a child king isn't just about having your own bedroom and an official snack taster. It's about stepping into a world where every grown-up claims they'd die for the crown, but can't even agree on who gets to hold the royal umbrella when it rains. You're technically in charge. Your face is on the coins, after all, but the real currency at court is confusion. It starts before you're even fully awake. The morning briefing sounds important. Your Majesty, the tax council is in uproar. But you're still figuring out how to button your doublet without assistance. Every adult bows and calls you sire, but their eyes flick over your shoulder, searching for the nearest power broker. You are the main character, but everyone around you is auditioning for a starring role in the drama of your life. Let's talk about your first royal council meeting. Picture a room filled with men in uncomfortable tights, each representing a powerful family, city, or interest group. The air is thick with the scent of ink, candles, and at least one nervous breakdown. Your throne, which is already too big for you, has been dragged to the end of a long, echoing table. Around it, a collection of barons, bishops, and uncles debate serious matters like who's in charge of the navy and why does the royal chicken coop smell so bad. It's all very serious, except for the fact that you're currently doodling in the margins of a parchment titled Trade Agreement. They say a king's word is law, but nobody warns you how many people will try to put words in your mouth. The Chancellor leans in, whispering, "Perhaps your Majesty would like to approve a new tax." The Treasurer coughs. Or perhaps not. You want to say, "Can I have a pony?" But instead, you're handed a quill and told to make a momentous decision about wheat tariffs. The only wheat you care about is in your breakfast porridge. But the room watches, pens poised, waiting for you to become a legend, or, at the very least, not spill ink on your tunic. This is politics, medieval style. A board game played by people who never follow the rules. Everyone says they serve you, but what they really mean is, "I'm watching for a mistake." Each question is a test, each compliment a trap, and each disagreement is an opportunity for someone to storm out in outrage, only to return 5 minutes later with a fresh plate of grievances. Behind every polite bow is a subtle power struggle. Some courtiers try to win your favor with gifts, exotic birds, rare books, a suspiciously large pie. Others try to win over your nurse or your tutor, whispering their own agendas between lessons in Latin grammar. And don't even get started on family. Your uncles are especially dangerous, always lurking near the throne, offering to help with decisions you never actually asked to make. One minute they're suggesting a change to the calendar. The next, they're volunteering to temporarily take over the regency. The regency, of course, is the medieval equivalent of just holding your phone for a minute and then blocking all your contacts. Even your childhood friends can't be trusted. Yesterday you were racing toy boats in the moat. Today, your playmate is suddenly the son of an ambassador, tasked with reporting your every word back to his father. You start to wonder if the only person not plotting is the castle cat, and even then, you keep a suspicious eye on the tabby during council meetings. If you're lucky, you get through the day without accidentally starting a trade war or granting your cousin exclusive rights to all the royal honey. If you're unlucky, you wake up the next day to discover the Chamberlain has interpreted your yes to mean yes. Invade Normandy. The truth is, no one really listens to a child king unless you make a mistake. Then, suddenly, everyone is very interested in your opinion. Your Highness, did you mean to insult the bishop's hat? Probably not. But now it's an international incident, so you learn quickly. Never say yes, never say no, and always look like you're considering something very profound, even if you're just trying to remember where you hid your favorite marble. In the end, being a king in short pants is mostly about surviving until bedtime, when, for a few hours, no one is asking for your signature, your blessing, or your strategic opinion on sheep. For now, breakfast. The meal that's supposed to set you up for a day of wisdom, diplomacy, and not accidentally signing away your kingdom. As a medieval child king, you'd expect to begin your royal morning with a spread fit for, well, a king. Spoiler: reality is more questionable porridge and less continental buffet. But let's take you step by step through the culinary journey that is your first meal of the day. First, there's the waking chaos. You're still shaking off dreams of flying dragons or, more likely, running away from your Latin tutor. When the kitchen servants scurry into your chamber, one's carrying a tray, another's poking a bowl with a suspiciously long spoon, and at least two are whispering prayers that you'll approve of the bread. It's a parade of nervous energy and medieval kitchen politics, all focused on your underage appetite. The breakfast menu is a window into medieval priorities: survival, superstition, and the art of not being poisoned. Your spread begins with pottage, a thick, lumpy stew that's been bubbling in the castle cauldron since, roughly, the invention of fire. Today's special? Oats, leeks, the last surviving turnip, and a questionable bit of salted pork, if the kitchen staff is feeling optimistic. The color is best described as sad beige. The texture, closer to wet cement than oatmeal. Bread is non-negotiable. Every meal, every day, you are confronted with hunks of bread so dense and chewy you could use them to patch a drafty window or stun an intruder. The royal loaf is technically made from fine white flour, but fine is a relative term. The crust is harder than your father's old battle shield, and it's more likely to chip a tooth than inspire gratitude. Of course, there's a bread taster on hand, whose job is to sample your slice before you risk it. In theory, this is to catch any poison, but really, you suspect the bread taster is just looking for an excuse to escape morning lessons. Occasionally, there's an egg. If so, it will arrive sitting proudly in a cup, still warm from the chicken, or at least from the kitchen fire. If you're lucky, it's been boiled just right. If you're unlucky, it's runny in ways that feel vaguely threatening. Asking where the egg came from is not considered polite. Just eat, smile, and pray to whichever saint covers food safety. There might even be meat, a sliver of smoked fish, a curl of ham, or, on rare occasions, a greasy sausage so heavily salted it doubles as both meal and preservative. Meat is a luxury, a statement that you are, in fact, at the top of the food chain, provided no one else gets there first. What about drinks? Forget about orange juice or a nice cup of hot chocolate. The castle's water supply is, to put it gently, not inspiring confidence. Instead, you're offered small ale, a weak, barely alcoholic beer that's safer to drink than water. It's served in a pewter cup, and the kitchen assures you it's clean, which, in medieval terms, means we tried our best. Let's not forget the etiquette. Your nurse and the castle steward hover as you eat, watching your every chew like hawks. There's a right way to hold your spoon. There's a correct order for biting your bread. And woe betide the royal child who asks for jam or honey on a weekday. Such extravagance is for feast days, not for the humdrum misery of a council meeting at dawn. And, of course, you're never really alone at breakfast. The pages are lingering, pretending to tidy the room. The taster is nervously eyeing the sausage. Your advisor is lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to ask if you've thought about taxes. Even the court jester makes an appearance, ready to turn your first mouthful of gruel into a joke about royal bowels. So you chew in silence, under the gaze of half the castle, knowing that this meal is your best defense against fainting mid-edict. You finish with a sigh, mentally preparing for another day of being king, powered, if nothing else, by the sheer density of medieval bread. Getting dressed as a medieval child king is not a solo adventure. It's more of a high-stakes team sport, the sort that requires strategy, patience, and several people with strong opinions about sleeves. Forget the romantic notion of slipping into royal attire with a casual flourish. Your mornings begin with a wardrobe committee, a valet, 2 page boys, a nurse who insists you'll catch your death if you don't double layer, and the master of robes, whose job is to ensure you look like you inherited not only the crown but the family's entire inventory of brocade. It starts with the basics, a linen shirt that in theory should be soft, but in practice feels like it's been pre-washed in gravel. Your nurse sniffs it to make sure it's at least vaguely clean. Then come the woolen stockings, pulled up to your knees so tightly they threaten to cut off circulation. The itch sets in immediately. Medieval wool is not known for its gentle touch. You try not to scratch, because nothing says fit to rule like a king wriggling around like he sat on a beehive. Next comes the tunic, the centerpiece of child king fashion. Yours is velvet, the color carefully chosen to indicate both royal status and a parent's fondness for expensive laundry. It has so many buttons you need help just to move your arms. The master of robes circles you like a bird of prey, checking every seam for signs of peasantness and grumbling about last year's trends. There are layers upon layers, an undertunic, an overtunic, and sometimes a mysterious third tunic that nobody can quite explain, but everyone agrees is essential for formality. By the time they finish tying the sash tightly, so you remember not to slouch, your torso is armored in fabric, your arms barely bend, and you're sweating before breakfast. But you're not done. There's a cloak for warmth, a surcoat for ceremony, and, for those extra formal occasions, a tabard covered in embroidered animals that look like they lost a fight with a tapestry. Each piece is heavy and stiff, designed less for comfort and more for the court to admire you as a walking heraldic banner. Shoes are another ordeal. Technically, you have choices. Realistically, every pair is either 2 sizes too large, a gift for when you grow, or so narrow they threaten to snap your toes off at the knuckle. The leather is unyielding, and the royal cobbler, a man who believes shoes should last through 3 generations, will glare if you mention blisters. Walking across the stone floors becomes a demonstration of grace under pressure. And by pressure, I mean the physical sensation of slowly being foot-wrapped by a medieval boa constrictor. The finishing touches are where things get weird. There's always a ceremonial sword, not sharp enough to actually use, but heavy enough to drag down your belt and your dignity. Your hair is combed and parted, sometimes dusted with powder to keep the lice guessing. Rings are slipped on fingers, some of which you're warned never to lose, as they're heirlooms. code for last seen on a missing cousin. And, of course, you're presented with a miniature version of the royal scepter, which you hold like a polite hostage until someone says you can put it down. Throughout this whole process, the court is watching. Every adjustment is scrutinized. If you sneeze, 3 people leap forward with perfumed handkerchiefs. If you yawn, someone writes it down for tomorrow's gossip. You are dressed not to feel good, but to remind everyone of their place in the social pecking order, and to keep up appearances, even if it means you can't breathe properly until after dinner. So you take a last look in the polished shield that passes for a mirror. You look regal, if slightly overwhelmed. You're less a boy than a small woolen fortress, ready to survive another day of being seen, judged, and, if you're lucky, only lightly pinched by your breeches. Fashion, after all, is pain. Especially when you're king, it's hard to overstate the misery of a medieval day planner, especially when you're a child king. While other children your age are skipping stones or trying to steal pastries from the kitchen, you are staring down a schedule that would make a corporate lawyer weep. Your job, apparently, is to rule a kingdom. But ruling, as you discover before your first molar is even loose, mostly means attending meetings that drag on longer than the construction of your castle's west wing. Let's start with the Royal Council meeting, a daily fixture that arrives whether you're ready or not. You're summoned to the council chamber, which smells faintly of dust, boiled cabbage, and at least one anxious uncle. The table is long, crowded with bearded men in increasingly extravagant hats. There's the treasurer, who always looks constipated, the chancellor, who's memorized the entire legal code and wants you to know it, and several knights, who mainly show up for the snacks. The meeting begins promptly at an hour you'd normally reserve for hiding from Latin homework. The first agenda item is almost always a crisis. Sometimes it's a peasant revolt, sometimes a disputed cow, sometimes grave news from the north involving nothing graver than someone's cousin being rude about turnips. You're expected to listen gravely, nod wisely, and if possible, not spill the ink pot in your lap. The truth? Most of the talking is done by everyone but you. You are the center of attention and also the least important person in the room, a truly impressive contradiction, only possible in royal circles. Between reports, your main job is to look regal. You try to sit tall, but the council seat is so big your feet dangle like a puppet's. You wonder if anyone would notice if you brought a cushion, or maybe just switched to a lower chair. The Chancellor starts reading a list of new laws, his voice so monotonous it could curdle milk. Someone is always snoring. If you're lucky, the commotion is only interrupted by the court jester getting dragged out for disruptive juggling. Next comes the procession of people who want things, nobles demanding favors, abbots lobbying for more church land, and at least one distant cousin who insists he should be the new keeper of royal geese. You're expected to listen, nod, and occasionally agree to something incomprehensible about tariffs, say yes to the wrong thing, and you might end up promising half the treasury to a monastery with a very creative definition of charity. Lunch arrives, a merciful break, but don't expect any privacy. You eat at the council table, surrounded by people who watch your fork with the intensity of professional magicians. It's a meal, and an audience rolled into one, and every bite is a performance. Did you eat the fish? Good, because the bishop brought it. Avoided the bread? The baker's son is going to be in tears by sunset. You learn quickly, politics is just a complicated food chain, and you're somewhere between garnish and main course. After lunch, the day continues with more meetings, treaty signings, legal hearings, and public audiences, where townsfolk air grievances so dramatic they could be a travelling play. You sit through complaints about tax rates, sheep thefts, and occasionally accusations of witchcraft. You're pretty sure one lady is just mad because someone moved her favourite rock. Your job is to look wise and impartial, even as your mind wanders to the possibility of sneaking off for a nap behind the tapestries. The day finally ends with yet another meeting, this one focused on tomorrow's schedule. Your advisor reads it out, as if hoping you'll spontaneously grow 10 years and an interest in regional grain exports. But by now, your head is nodding, your legs are numb, and your only real achievement is making it through without accidentally declaring war on Flanders. Congratulations, your day job is over, until it starts again at sunrise. And you thought being king would be all fun and feasts. You'd think the one upside to being a medieval child king would be playtime after all. Who's going to tell you no when you're the monarch? But here's the catch. Every minute of play is another opportunity for a plot, a scandal, or at the very least, a cousin with questionable motives to try something shady with the hobby horse. In your world, hide and seek is a full-contact sport, and tag might end with someone getting exiled. First, there's the matter of your friends. You have plenty, but almost all of them are double agents, sons and daughters of noble families, strategically placed in your orbit to spy, charm, or, if their parents are feeling ambitious, nudge you toward a conveniently arranged betrothal before you finish your porridge. They smile sweetly. But every game comes with subtext. When you play chess, they let you win, unless their family's in disgrace, in which case suddenly you're facing a child prodigy who plays like Machiavelli with finger paint. The castle itself should be the world's greatest playground, with endless corridors, secret doors, and spiral staircases that lead to rooms nobody remembers building. But each hiding spot has already been mapped by a page boy working for your uncle. And every tapestry has a noble child lurking behind it with a political agenda. You tried playing hide and seek once. Your best friend accidentally locked you in a broom closet for 3 hours, which somehow coincided with an important council meeting you were supposed to attend. You emerged dusty and cranky, only to discover half the court was now convinced you were meditating on affairs of state. You can't make this up. Even the toys are potential liabilities. The wooden knight your nurse gave you for your birthday? Made by the royal carpenter who's loyal to your stepmother. The little boat for the moat? Gift from a foreign ambassador, meaning it's probably being watched more closely than your treaties. You develop a strange habit of checking your marbles for hidden messages and counting your jacks every night, just in case someone swapped them out for tiny scrolls calling for a new tax on honey. Sometimes you just want to run in the gardens. But the moment you step outside, a small army of attendants materializes, forming a protective cordon between you and the nearest hedge. The gardener's son sidles up to you, trying to teach you how to skip stones, but spends most of his time fishing for rumors about your next big decree. If you show too much interest in one peasant child over another, you risk igniting a full-on minor rebellion among the pages, one that ends with someone's family petitioning the regency for a better allowance. Physical games aren't much safer. You'd love to play tag, but nobody wants to be the child who outruns the king. You're always it, but no one's ever truly caught, because letting the monarch lose is either a sign of disrespect or a suspicious act of deference. Either way, your nurse takes notes for later, and the master of protocol looks ready to file a report. If you dare try a simple game of mock sword fighting, you'll find the wooden swords are suddenly replaced with padded batons, and an anxious squire with strict instructions not to let you get so much as a splinter. Every scrape is a matter of national security, and should you ever try to play alone, someone panics. Last time you tried to explore the old tower by yourself, you triggered a full-scale search party. The result? You, quietly sulking on your favorite step, surrounded by a dozen adults who now suspect you of plotting your own escape. Playtime, as it turns out, is never simple. Every game is a lesson in power, trust, and just how many people are invested in your safety, mostly for their own benefit. Even a simple round of marbles is a high-wire act, performed for a gallery of whispering grown-ups. So you learn to play the safest game of all, smiling sweetly, pretending not to notice the politics swirling around your skipping rope, and carefully hiding the fact that, more than anything, you'd rather be just another kid outside the castle walls. If you think being king gets you out of school, think again. Education for a medieval child king is not a privilege. It's a marathon, a gauntlet, and frankly a contact sport for the soul. Your classroom is a series of drafty chambers, echoing with the sighs of exhausted tutors, the scratching of quills, and your own desperate prayers for just one lesson about anything remotely fun. Your first teacher is the royal nurse, who begins your schooling before you even lose your first tooth. Her curriculum is simple: how to sit still, how not to drop the silverware, and how to avoid eating your wax seal again. But once you've mastered not embarrassing yourself at the dinner table, the real lessons begin. The palace brings in a conveyor belt of tutors, each one more terrifying than the last. Your days are divided between lessons in Latin, because everything important is in Latin, French, because everyone important is in France, and the intricate science of genealogy, because apparently you're related to every monarch from here to Constantinople, and you'll be quizzed on this right before lunch. Then there's arithmetic, which is somehow both more boring and more alarming when you realize every mistake might become a national debt crisis. History is a favorite subject of your most dramatic tutor. Every lesson is a cautionary tale. And this king, my boy, was thrown off a bridge for signing the wrong treaty. Remember that. Geography, meanwhile, is mostly an exercise in coloring outside the lines. Since half the world's borders change every time someone marries the wrong cousin, you keep a map on the wall, but every week there's a new scribble in red ink that means yet another neighboring duke has decided he wants your sheep. Physical education is more survival than sport. Swordplay and archery lessons are supposed to prepare you for battle, or, at the very least, for ceremonial parades in which you don't accidentally drop your sword. The sword is heavier than it looks, and the last time you swung it, you nearly decapitated the court jester. This is still spoken of in hushed tones. Archery is less about hitting the target, and more about not putting out an advisor's eye. You'd think riding lessons would be easier, but your horse has its own opinions about who should be in charge. The stable master keeps a running tally of how often you land in the hay. Then there's etiquette, drilled into you by the master of protocol, a man who seems personally offended by your elbows. There's a fork for every course, a bow for every situation, and a list of greetings so long you need a scroll to keep them straight. You practice for hours. How to stand, how to walk, how to enter a room without tripping on your own shoes. None of it is optional. The penalty for forgetting which spoon is which. A lecture so long you start to suspect this is the real punishment for treason. Every lesson is monitored by a small army of adults, all of whom are convinced that a single mistake might plunge the kingdom into chaos. When you get something right, no one notices. When you make a mistake, there's a flurry of whispers, 3 extra prayers at chapel, and a stern reminder that the eyes of history are upon you. You develop a talent for nodding at just the right moments and for memorizing the faces of your tutors, just in case you ever need to fake a sudden illness. There are rare moments when lessons are fun. You love the old stories about knights and dragons, even if your tutor insists the moral is never trust your cousins. But mostly, education is a never-ending obstacle course of facts, figures, and etiquette drills. In the end, you realize that learning, like ruling, is about survival. If you make it to bedtime without a scolding, a bruise, or a royal faux pas, you count it as a victory. Tomorrow, the scrolls will be waiting, but for tonight, you sleep with the sweet relief of having survived another day's lesson. Nothing brings out your inner cynic quite like falling ill as a medieval child king. As it turns out, having absolute power does not mean your sniffles get cured any faster. In fact, it's more like an open invitation for every quack in the kingdom to test their latest theories on your royal sinuses. Welcome to the world of medieval medicine, where every cough is an omen, and your doctor's main tools are guesswork, prayer, and a suspicious collection of leeches. It starts innocently enough. You wake up with a sore throat. Within minutes, word spreads throughout the castle faster than news of a free feast. Suddenly, the entire royal medical staff is hovering at your bedside, clutching herbs, bottles, and a look of deep concern that does not fill you with confidence. Your nurse immediately suggests prayer. The court physician, who always smells faintly of onions, offers a diagnosis in Latin, which is somehow more terrifying than if he'd just said, "I don't know." The treatments come thick and fast. First up, the leech. No matter the illness, cold, fever, mysterious rash, the medieval solution is to let a leech rebalance your humors. This is never optional. You grit your teeth as the physician assures you. The king's blood is especially good for drawing out the evil spirits. If you're lucky, you get away with just one leech. If you're unlucky, it's a whole family reunion, and you start to suspect the leeches are getting a taste for royal blood. If leeches fail, there's always bleeding. Out comes the ceremonial bowl, which looks suspiciously like the one used for porridge, and a knife that's been sterilized by waving it over a candle. The physician insists it's for your own good, even as you eye the nearest exit and wish you could swap places with the court jester. Herbal remedies are next. Your chamber fills with the smell of mint, rosemary, garlic, and, for some reason, fish. You're encouraged to drink foul-tasting concoctions, each promising to purge the body of bile. If you protest, you're told this is a traditional cure handed down from the ancients, which you suspect just means invented last Tuesday by a monk with insomnia. Your tutor insists this is character building. And then, of course, there are the poultices. Every ailment calls for a different sticky mixture, applied liberally to your chest, feet, or sometimes just the top of your head, because, apparently, nobody can agree on where illnesses hide. You find yourself smeared with honey, goose fat, or breadcrumbs, transforming you from king to walking buffet for castle mice. For stomach trouble, there's a favorite medieval remedy, a warm beer and bed rest, accompanied by the priest, who hovers just in case you're about to shuffle off your mortal coil. Sometimes you're given wine, watered down, but still enough to make you wonder if the adults are trying to sedate you or just distract themselves. Serious illnesses are an even bigger ordeal. Rumors sweep through the court. Has the king been cursed? Is it witchcraft? Suddenly, half the castle is fasting, and someone's digging up a relic to place under your pillow. Your mother hires an astrologer to consult the stars, who announces that Mercury is in retrograde, which is somehow supposed to explain your rash. Surgery, should you ever require it, is performed by the same man who sharpens the knives and occasionally trims your hair. Anesthesia means bite down on this stick and hope for the best. The less said about this, the better. And throughout it all, you're not really allowed to be sick quietly. Your health is a national concern. Courtiers whisper about your color, nurses debate your pulse, and someone is always ready with a fresh leech, just in case. If you survive, everyone credits their favorite remedy. If you don't, well, the kingdom just moves on to the next unfortunate heir. So, you do your best to stay healthy. You wash occasionally, avoid drafty corridors, and never trust food that smells like destiny, because in the Middle Ages, medicine is more performance than science, and every cure is a new adventure in creative suffering. If you imagine a medieval child, king bathed in rosewater, and scrubbed daily to a royal shine, let's burst that bubble now. Cleanliness, in your world, is more theory than practice, and personal hygiene is a group activity you dread as much as your morning Latin lesson. It's not your fault you smell faintly of yesterday's stew and something suspiciously like old cheese. That's just how royalty rolls. Let's start with bathing. In theory, the royal household is supposed to be a model of cleanliness. In practice, taking a bath is such a monumental event that it's entered into the official record. The castle only heats enough water for a full soak about once a month, and that's considered extravagant. Your copper tub is dragged into your chamber with all the solemnity of a religious relic. Servants scurry back and forth with steaming buckets, filling the tub inch by inch as you sit nearby, trying not to look directly at your own reflection in the armor-polished mirror. When it's finally time to disrobe, you're surrounded by a small battalion of helpers, your nurse, 2 footmen, a page with a towel, and at least one advisor who insists on supervising for tradition. Privacy is a foreign concept. Everyone has an opinion on water temperature, soap technique, and how vigorously to scrub your royal elbows. The soap is homemade, grey, and smells like a mixture of lard and last season's lavender. After 10 minutes of soaking, you're rinsed, shivering, and slightly cleaner than when you started, though your hair is now styled in what can only be described as owl chic. Between these rare ceremonial baths, daily hygiene is a minimalist affair. Face and hands are wiped with a damp rag, hopefully one that hasn't already made the rounds with your siblings. Teeth are cleaned by chewing the end of a twig and rinsing with weak wine. Mouthwash, as a concept, has not yet graced medieval Europe, and you're fairly sure your breath could scare off a wolfhound. Underarms? That's what the layers of linen are for. If you're lucky, a dab of rosemary water keeps you from being mistaken for the cheese seller. If not, you learn to embrace the natural aroma of youthful ambition blended with yesterday's onions. Hair is rarely washed, once a week if you beg, and usually combed with the same ivory comb everyone else uses. Lice are an inevitable part of court life, and you learn not to complain unless you want to spend an afternoon being dusted with ashes while your tutor recites a lecture on humility. Your royal clothes aren't helping matters. Velvet and wool do an excellent job trapping heat, moisture, and every odor you've accumulated since sunrise. By midday, your tunic is less regal attire and more portable spice rack. Changing clothes is an ordeal, so you're expected to wear the same outfit until someone important enough complains, or until it can stand up by itself. The master of robes airs your clothes out the window, but nothing quite removes the undertones of sweat, candle wax, and defeat. It's not all bad, though. The less you bathe, the less likely you are to catch the mysterious ailments medieval doctors blame on bad air and open pores. A little dirt, it turns out, is considered protective. Too much, and you risk being mistaken for a peasant, or worse, a Frenchman, depending on which courtier is gossiping. Still, you develop coping strategies. Strategic placement near open windows. Liberal use of perfume sachets tucked into your sleeves. If things get dire, you feign interest in the latest herbal remedy, hoping someone will douse you in rosemary instead of leeches. So, yes, you are the most powerful child in the land, but you also smell like you've been slow-cooked in onion broth. That's just royal hygiene, equal parts tradition, superstition, and creative denial. Welcome to the sweet and sour scent of medieval power. Meals, for a medieval child king, are neither casual nor comforting. They're public theatre, a daily performance staged on long wooden tables and under the watchful gaze of everyone who matters, and most who don't. You might dream of slurping pottage in peace or gnawing on a drumstick like a wild boar. But your reality is a multi-act drama of etiquette, mild peril, and culinary suspense. Let's set the scene, the Great Hall. It's loud, smoky, and packed with everyone from lords to liveried footmen. The table is a parade of trenchers, that's bread as a plate for those keeping score. Pewter cups and knives, sharp enough to start a minor war. Your own seat, the royal high chair, yes. You basically have a throne at the table, sits on a dais. So your every chew is on display. The only thing missing is a spotlight and an announcer saying, "Let's see if His Majesty drops his spoon tonight." The meal begins with the ceremonial hand-washing. A servant pours water over your fingers into a basin, It's less about cleanliness and more about signaling to the court that you aren't a barbarian, no matter what rumors the French ambassadors are spreading. The towel is whisked away, and immediately a hush falls. All eyes swivel to you. You must take the first bite. This is the medieval equivalent of a trust fall, except instead of colleagues, you have a royal taster and the ever-present possibility of poison. Every bite is watched, and every mouthful is analyzed for both etiquette and existential risk. The taster samples each dish first, sometimes with all the enthusiasm of a man facing down a firing squad. The protocol is clear. You wait for him to swallow, wait a moment longer, and only then can you dig in. If he coughs, the entire table freezes. If he goes pale, everyone begins calculating their odds of inheriting your slippers. The courses arrive in waves. Steaming pottage, roast meats with questionable origins, baked fish that sometimes still looks like it could swim away, and pies so elaborately decorated you wonder if they're meant to be eaten or just admired from a distance. Fruit is for special occasions, as are sweets, which usually involve honey, nuts, and something your teeth will remember for weeks. Etiquette is relentless. You must break bread with your hands, but use your knife for meat. Do not gesture with your utensils. No matter how strong the urge to stage a miniature battle on your trencher. Never slurp, never burp, and under no circumstances mention that the beans are repeating on you. If you drop something, you must pretend it never happened, even if it's currently rolling toward the archbishop. The court jester, meanwhile, lurks nearby, ready to pounce on any mistake. One poorly timed hiccup, and suddenly there's a sonnet about his royal gassiness circulating among the pages. Laughing with your mouth full? Fodder for 3 days of jokes, and a possible addition to the royal chronicle. Even the Queen Mother, who once dropped an entire roast chicken onto her lap, will tesk disapprovingly if you so much as spill a crumb. Then there are the politics of the meal. Seating arrangements are a game of alliances. Who sits near you? Who's exiled to the end of the table by the draughty door? A single misplaced lord can spark a grudge lasting generations. Sharing a plate of figs with the wrong person, and suddenly you're being blamed for a family feud. Drinks are mostly watered wine or weak ale, and the rules for toasting are as complex as the tax code. Raise your cup at the wrong moment, and the Chancellor will explain in detail the appropriate gestures. By dessert, you're so exhausted by etiquette that the arrival of a sticky tart feels like a small miracle. By the end, you haven't so much eaten as survived. Your jaw aches from polite chewing. Your nerves are shot from constant vigilance. And as you leave the table, you silently thank your royal taster, the unsung hero of every meal. Congratulations, another meal conquered. Only 3 more to go until bedtime. As a medieval child king, you quickly learn there's one ingredient that's always in season at the royal table: suspicion. Poison is less a threat and more a constant companion, lurking somewhere between the salted pork and the cup of wine. Every mealtime becomes a low-stakes game of Russian roulette. Except the odds aren't exactly in your favor, and the losers don't get a do-over. It starts with the royal taster, that unfortunate soul whose job is to try everything before you do. On paper, it sounds reassuring. In reality, it just means there's always someone in the room whose facial expression you watch more closely than the archbishop's during Lent. The taster, let's call him Geoffrey, approaches each dish with the bravery of a man petting a lion. If Geoffrey so much as winces after sampling the stew, the entire kitchen staff breaks out in a nervous sweat. If Geoffrey slumps over, you know you're skipping second helpings. The kitchen, meanwhile, is a swirling nest of intrigue. You'd think the greatest threat to your health would be undercooked mutton, but you'd be wrong. The real danger comes from powders, herbs, and the ever-present risk that your cook has been bribed by someone who wants to see a new face on the coins. It doesn't help that your food is often prepared by people whose loyalty is measured in sacks of grain and the hope that their nephew won't be pressed into service. Every pie has a hidden story. Every sauce is a potential alibi. Even outside mealtimes, you're not safe. That sweetmeat offered by your visiting aunt? Eat up, darling, it's your favorite. Translation: if you trust me with your life, prove it. You develop the delicate art of feigning fullness, hiding questionable morsels in your napkin, and handing off sweets to the dog, who, to be fair, seems to have the constitution of a goat. You envy him. Poison paranoia isn't just for dinner. It's in your bathwater. The nurse checks it for strange scents. Your inkwell. Scribes whisper that certain dyes cause madness. And even your clothes. Your grandmother claims someone once tried to line a tunic with a venomous powder. It's enough to make you long for the simple threat of a cold draft. The council takes these dangers very seriously, mostly because none of them want to get promoted by accident. Every gift from a foreign court is inspected, sniffed, and sometimes handed off to a particularly unlucky page. The master of the pantry keeps an actual list of suspicious fruit, and there's a protocol for discarding menacing cheeses. Even your goblet is specially marked, so nobody can swap it out in a moment of distraction. Still, you're not above switching it yourself if you spot your sister eyeing you with too much interest. No wonder, then, that you start developing odd eating habits. You test new foods on a piece of bread first. You stir your stew for a full minute before taking a bite, just in case something floats to the top. When someone insists you try the latest royal delicacy, pickled eels in mustard sauce, you declare, "After you." You learn quickly that surviving a banquet is a victory, and that the worst stomachache isn't as bad as being remembered as the king who was taken out by a bad fig. All of this has side effects. You're suspicious of gifts. You're wary of feasts. Your friendships with kitchen staff are genuine, but tinged with caution. Even the castle cats know better than to eat what you drop. Your nurse tells you that living in fear is bad for your digestion. You nod politely and skip dessert. Ultimately, you survive not by being fearless, but by being just suspicious enough. In the medieval royal household, food is love, war, and power, all served with a side of doubt. Bon appetit, Your Majesty. If you think being king means you make all the decisions, think again. As a medieval child king, you're surrounded by advisors, dozens of them, each with their own agenda and their own perfectly rehearsed bow. They're called counselors, ministers, chancellors, and, if we're being honest, professional suggestion machines. But don't let the fancy titles fool you. Most are just waiting for you to blink so they can run the kingdom their way. Your inner circle is an odd collection of personalities. There's the chancellor, whose face is permanently fixed in an expression of wise concern, and who believes every problem can be solved with another rule, tax, or day of fasting. Then you've got the treasurer, who's so obsessed with coin that he once tried to tax the moonlight for royal illumination. The Lord Chamberlain is always sighing about tradition and quietly plotting to have his nephew promoted. The master of the hunt insists on discussing venison supplies during every council session, regardless of whether there's an actual famine outside. On paper, they're there to help you rule. In practice, they're there to make sure no one else gets to help you rule. Every bit of advice comes wrapped in a subtle warning. My liege, it would be unwise to trust anyone too quickly. Except, perhaps, myself. The result? You get multiple solutions for every problem, none of which are simple, and all of which make your head hurt more than a midday crown fitting. These advisors don't work alone. Each has a flock of underlings, scribes, cousins, ambitious sons, constantly lurking in the shadows, ready to eavesdrop and accidentally deliver the wrong message to the kitchens. You find yourself talking in riddles just to avoid being quoted out of context at tomorrow's breakfast. Asking for advice becomes a delicate dance. If you agree too quickly, you're called naive. If you hesitate, you're labeled indecisive. If you choose your own path, you're probably accused of being manipulated by someone else. It doesn't help that every council session turns into a performance. Advisors argue over everything: grain storage, legal reforms. What color banners should be hung for St. Alaric's Day? Each debate is less about finding the best answer and more about one-upping the competition. You've learned to recognize the warning signs: the Chancellor's eyebrows rising, the Treasurer's fingers drumming on the table, the Chamberlain's carefully neutral. Once, a squabble over a minor castle repair nearly ended in a duel, but the real skill your advisors have perfected is the art of plausible deniability. If their advice succeeds, they take all the credit. If it fails, you're gently reminded that, technically, you're the king and therefore responsible for everything, including last week's rat census fiasco, which somehow became a diplomatic crisis with Norway. You try to trust at least a few people, but the court is a forest of hidden traps. Sometimes, the friendliest advice comes from the least friendly faces. The only thing all your advisors agree on is that you should listen to them, and not the others. Even the castle cats aren't this territorial. In the end, you learn to play your own game. You nod. You listen. You smile politely, while mentally composing a list of the 5 people you trust and the 37 you don't. You keep your real thoughts hidden behind a mask of royal calm. And, when in doubt, you claim you need more time to consult the oracles. Sometimes you even do. Being king, you discover, is less about ruling and more about surviving the daily parade of advice, warnings, and thinly veiled power grabs. In the land of medieval politics, your advisors are your greatest asset and your biggest threat. If you thought having siblings was tough in a normal family, try sharing a castle with them and a throne in the background. In the world of a medieval child king, sibling rivalry isn't just about who gets the last pastry. It's about inheritance, loyalty, and occasionally, survival. Welcome to the ultimate Game of Thrones, played at an age when most kids are still arguing over marbles. Your brothers and sisters are your closest companions, and, at the same time, your greatest competitors. They know all your secrets, where you hide your favorite trinket, how to make you laugh at the wrong moment, and, most dangerously, which of the nobles you secretly call serfats a lot behind closed doors. On the surface, you're a charming royal family, posing for tapestries and smiling during feast days. Behind the scenes, it's a daily contest of wit, nerves, and, on bad days, outright sabotage. Older siblings are the most dangerous. They're always angling for a slice of your authority, especially if there's any doubt about your legitimacy or your health. They're experts in the art of the helpful suggestion. "Oh dear brother, are you sure you want to wear that crown today? I heard the velvet is infested with fleas. Or perhaps I could take your place at the council meeting while you rest. I'd hate for you to look tired in front of the Chancellor." You know they mean well. Well, they mean to look like they mean well. Younger siblings are a different challenge. They're cute, they're clever, and they get away with everything. Drop a pie in the main hall? The youngest gets a pat on the head, while you get a lecture about royal dignity. They're always underfoot, eager to play games, and disturbingly good at eavesdropping. Somehow, they're the first to hear any rumors, and the last to let you forget them. There's always a constant competition for affection, not just from your parents, but from tutors, advisors, and even the castle dogs. Did your little sister memorize more Latin than you this week? That's worth at least a minor scandal and a dozen snide remarks at dinner. Did your older brother outshine you in sword practice? Congratulations, now half the court is whispering about succession planning. Games take on a sinister edge. Hide and seek isn't just for fun, it's reconnaissance. You might find your hiding spot mysteriously discovered just as the Lord Steward passes by, or your toy soldiers repainted in your siblings' colors. Even chess is dangerous. Every move could be interpreted as a metaphor for a real power grab. There are alliances, too, shifting and fragile as morning dew. Sometimes, you and your sister team up against your older brother for control of the courtyard. Other times, it's every royal child for themselves. There's never a dull moment, and never a safe place to hide your sweets. Worst of all, the grown-ups encourage it. Your mother wants you all to be close, but your father drops hints about proving yourself worthy. Tutors praise the sibling who excels, and the council loves a little healthy competition, provided it doesn't turn into an actual duel. On feast days, the entire family is paraded out like prized livestock, all smiles and unity. While beneath the table, you're quietly elbowing each other for the biggest slice of honey cake. Still, through all the scheming, spying, and squabbling, there's an undeniable bond. You're the only ones who truly understand the pressure, the expectations, and the strangeness of growing up royal. Sometimes, when no one else is watching, you even manage to laugh together. After all, if you can survive your siblings, you can probably survive anything, at least until the next pie-throwing incident in the Great Hall. If there's one constant comfort in the confusing life of a medieval child king, it's your pets, or so you'd think. While the royal menagerie provides a much-needed break from the scheming grown-ups and sibling side-eyes, even the castle animals and their human helpers come with their own dramas, plots, and spectacular acts of petty revenge. Let's start with your pets. Every respectable young monarch is expected to keep a selection of animals, dogs, falcons, a stubborn pony, and, if your family's feeling particularly ambitious, a peacock or two that exists purely to scream at sunrise. Your favorite hound is the only creature in the palace who doesn't care about your title, your crown, or your ever-expanding Latin homework. He only wants scraps and belly rubs, and you trust him completely, until you catch him chewing on your ceremonial slippers, again, in front of the bishop. Some mornings you envy his total disregard for protocol. Then there are the birds. The castle falconer is always telling you that your hawk will one day bring you glory in the hunt. But for now, she mostly brings mouse guts to your bedchamber and terrorizes the kitchen staff. The peacocks are good for parades, but are less fun when they decide the best place to show off their plumage is on your breakfast table, right in the porridge. Even your royal goldfish has a secret life, judging you from its murky bowl every time you flub your Latin declensions. If only animals were the only unpredictable residents. Enter the page boys. A pack of energetic, slightly chaotic children tasked with running messages, carrying cloaks, and occasionally accidentally spilling ink on the Chancellor's robes. Page boys come in two varieties: the ones who desperately want to be your friend, and the ones whose sole mission is to outprank you for palace bragging rights. The first group is usually loyal and helpful, until bribed with enough honey cakes by a rival advisor. The second group can be found hiding behind tapestries, plotting the next practical joke involving cold water, a chamber pot, or a strategically misplaced frog. Petty revenge isn't just for grown-ups in the royal court. In the world of children, it's an art form. Did a page boy tie knots in your bootlaces before a banquet? That calls for a counterattack, like hiding his shoes in the dovecote or swapping his assigned chores so he's stuck mucking out the stables for a week. Did your sister's kitten knock over your stack of history scrolls? The only logical response is to borrow the kitten for official palace business and return her with a new, slightly embarrassing ribbon. Animals, page boys, and even little siblings all play roles in the endless cycle of tiny victories and humiliations. Some days, you're the target, like the time the stable cat left a surprise in your bed and the story somehow made it to the council table. Other days, you're the mastermind, orchestrating a coincidental parade of geese past your brother's window during his arithmetic lesson. The adults pretend not to notice, but you're pretty sure the Queen Mother keeps a secret tally of wins and losses among the younger residents. Yet, beneath the harmless chaos, there's a kind of camaraderie. You're all navigating the strange rule-bound world of the palace together, finding comfort in a friendly wagging tail, a shared laugh, or the knowledge that even future kings and queens need someone to plot with or against from time to time. Because in a castle full of power struggles and rigid ceremony, the smallest acts of mischief and the loyalty of your four-legged friends are often the things that make royal life just bearable enough to face another day. For a medieval child king, bedtime is supposed to be the one guaranteed moment of comfort. A soft landing after a day filled with council meetings, etiquette drills, and enough intrigue to make you long for the simple life of a castle mouse. Unfortunately, in your world, even bedtime comes with its own set of anxieties. The castle may be locked up tight, but the stories that drift through its stone corridors are enough to keep anyone wide awake. The nightly ritual starts well enough. Your nurse bustles about, plumping your pillow and tucking you in beneath layers of itchy woolen blankets and inherited tapestries. The chamber is cold, the air tinged with the scent of candle wax and last week's turnip stew. Shadows flicker across the walls, thrown by the stubby candles that never seem to last quite long enough for comfort. As the wind howls through the window slits, you brace yourself for the main event. Bedtime stories. Forget whimsical fairy tales or gentle lullabies. Your nurse's stories are always rooted in truth, which, in medieval terms, means a helpful reminder that everyone from your ancestors to your immediate family has spent centuries being betrayed, besieged, poisoned, or otherwise unlucky. Her favorite theme? How young King Oswald lost the crown and his head. Every tale has a lesson, and it's usually trust no one, never eat suspicious mushrooms, and always check under your bed for rival claimants. The tales are delivered in a soothing whisper, but the content is pure nightmare fuel. One night, it's the story of Prince Edric, who fell asleep and woke up in a dungeon after his uncle borrowed his signet ring. The next, it's Queen Mildred, who dreamed of golden apples and woke up to find her favorite dog was a spy. Even the happy endings involve running away to a monastery and living out your days copying dusty scrolls. The message is clear. Sleep with one eye open, and never let your guard down. On the nights your nurse is away, your tutor tries to fill in with moral instruction. His bedtime stories are long-winded accounts of failed treaties, botched alliances, and the dangers of trusting foreigners, including, he'll add pointedly, anyone from across the river. Instead of drifting into slumber, you find yourself mentally revising your list of trusted advisors and making a note to double-check the locks on your wardrobe. It doesn't help that the castle itself seems designed to keep you on edge. Every groan of the beams, every distant howl from the courtyard, every creak of your canopy bed could be a sign that something or someone is lurking nearby. The tapestries on the wall, meant to keep out drafts, do nothing to stop your imagination from conjuring up a parade of ambitious cousins, jealous nobles, and the ghost of a long-dead king looking for his misplaced scepter. Even when you finally begin to drift off, the castle's routines continue. The night watch shifts with all the subtlety of a bear in a bell shop. Footsteps echo on the flagstones, doors open and close, and the occasional owl hoots in the rafters. You clutch your blanket a little tighter and remind yourself, as your nurse always says, that a good king never truly sleeps, he merely rests his eyes, just in case. Yet, despite the dread and the not-so-comforting stories, there's a certain comfort in the tradition. Every king before you has survived these nights. You're part of a long line of anxious children who grew up to rule, or at least to tell the tale. So you close your eyes, listen to the wind, and hope that tonight's dreams are less about dungeons and more about dragons you can actually defeat. From the moment you're crowned, sometimes before your baby teeth have all come in, the message is clear: you may be a child, but you're expected to act like a living legend. Welcome to the impossible world of royal expectations, where every step, word, and even sneeze is carefully measured and interpreted by a room full of adults who have never, not once, considered letting you just be a kid. Your every move is weighed against the long, looming shadows of your ancestors. Did King Aldrich ride his first horse at age 6? Time to saddle up, even if your feet barely reach the stirrups. Did Queen Matilda write poetry in flawless Latin by her 9th birthday? Well, there's your new bedtime reading assignment. The council keeps a mental scorecard, and every achievement, or let's be honest, every failure, is compared with tales of past monarchs who apparently never tripped, burped, or cried for their mother in public. You're taught, in painstaking detail, that your kingdom's prosperity, your family's legacy, and, depending on the priest, your soul's salvation all depend on your ability to live up to the job. Your tutors remind you that your signature can change the course of rivers, that your voice can launch armies, and that the fate of 1,000 villages rests on your understanding of basic math. No pressure, but it's not just the council and the tutors. Every member of the court, from the kitchen maids to the master of stables, treats you like the embodiment of their hopes and ambitions. A kind word from you can earn a knight his fortune. A frown can spark a family feud that lasts for generations. You quickly learn that even your smallest actions are magnified through the lens of royal gossip. If you eat too little at dinner, rumors spread that you're ill. Eat too much, and you're labeled soft. Show mercy to a servant, and you're either praised for your virtue or criticized for your weakness. Sometimes both in the same afternoon. Feast days, processions, and public audiences are high-wire acts. You're expected to wave just so, never let your crown slip, and smile in a way that's dignified but not smug. The chronicler stands by, quill poised, ready to record your first speech or your first spectacular mistake for future generations to argue over. Even your playtime is a performance. If you lose at chess, did you let your cousin win out of kindness? Or have you doomed the kingdom by showing weakness on the board? Meanwhile, your family is no help. Parents expect unwavering obedience and early wisdom. Siblings either look to you for guidance or plot to accidentally outperform you in every public setting. Uncles, aunts, and distant relatives drop hints about how much easier their childhoods were. Back in the mythical Golden Age, before every misstep could be written into the annals of history. The pressure to be wise is relentless, especially since your biggest accomplishment so far might be learning to whistle with your fingers. Yet, there's no escaping the role or the audience that comes with it. Even bedtime stories end with reminders of legendary child kings who never, ever fidgeted in their chairs. Still, in quiet moments, you dream of what it would be like to just be a regular kid. To run in the fields, to shout, to make a mess without fear of it becoming national news. But when dawn breaks, you put on your crown, even if it still doesn't fit. Square your tiny shoulders and walk out to face another day in the spotlight. Because in this world, even the smallest monarch is expected to make a mighty impression. If you thought birthday parties as a kid were nerve-wracking, with relatives pinching your cheeks and everyone singing off-key, imagine multiplying that by 1,000 and then adding Latin chanting, a room full of people in armor, and the terrifying possibility that the entire kingdom is watching to see if you trip. Welcome to your coronation, the most high-stakes party you'll ever attend, and the only one where cake is the least of your worries. Preparation for the big day begins months in advance. Tailors descend upon you with measuring tapes. Advisors bicker over the order of the processional. and the royal hairdresser is convinced that a good coronation coif can distract from any possible tears. The chronicler is already sharpening his quill, ready to record every cough, hiccup, or embarrassing moment for posterity. Meanwhile, the bishop reminds you daily of the sacred seriousness of it all, which is code for "don't mess this up." The castle transforms into a festival ground. Tapestries are hung. Flowers, real and possibly wax, are jammed into every available corner. And the kitchen staff work around the clock to bake bread, shaped like various animals of heraldic importance. Your siblings alternate between acting supportive and sneakily suggesting you wear mismatched stockings for luck. You start to wonder if they're genuinely trying to help, or just want a great story for the feasting table. The morning of the coronation, you're woken before sunrise by a flurry of servants. You're bathed, perfumed, and dressed in so many layers that sitting down becomes a distant memory. There's a last-minute rehearsal, which mostly consists of your nurse whispering, "Smile, but not too much. Stand tall, but not too stiff. Don't fidget. And whatever you do, for the love of St. Agatha, do not yawn." Your head is spinning before the crown is even in sight. As the bells toll, you're led into the great hall, every step echoing like a drumbeat of expectation. The nobility stands at attention. The peasants crane their necks for a glimpse, and the local musicians do their best to drown out your nervous heartbeat. At the front, the bishop waits with the holy oil and a look that could sour milk. The ceremony begins, full of solemn prayers, formal oaths, and a lot of words you only half understand. You kneel, you're anointed, and you try not to wince as the crown, too heavy, always, settles on your head with the gentle touch of a falling anvil. Then comes the moment everyone is waiting for. The official declaration. You're presented to the people as their rightful monarch. The crowd cheers, trumpets blare, and for a brief second, you wonder if anyone can tell that your knees are shaking. The stress is monumental. One sneeze, one stumble, and you're immortalized in stained glass as the king who dropped his scepter. But the ordeal isn't over. There's a banquet where you're expected to eat and speak without betraying your exhaustion, and a parade where your horse seems determined to walk sideways. Your smile is pasted on, your face aches, and your stomach is full of butterflies, or possibly just the bishop's health tonic. The festivities drag on well past your usual bedtime, and you find yourself envying the court jester, who at least gets to nap between performances. By the end of it all, you're crowned, congratulated, and completely wiped out. You survived your coronation, the world's most stressful birthday party, with higher stakes, worse snacks, and a guest list that includes everyone you'll ever disappoint. And as you finally collapse into bed, you realize being king may have its perks, but it also comes with the heaviest hat in the kingdom. One of the rare moments when your royal status actually seems fun, at least on the surface, is tournament day. From the high window of your castle, you watch the fields below transform into a thundering festival of banners, trumpets, and the unmistakable smell of trampled grass and roast meat. On tournament day, everyone comes out to play, but especially the grown men who've been waiting all year for an excuse to bash each other with sticks while you clap approvingly from your gilded seat. Preparations begin at dawn. Your wardrobe committee argues over which cloak will best hide the fact that you're yawning. The master of ceremonies rehearses the official introduction, his voice echoing off the stone walls. His Royal Majesty, the light of our hopes, the sovereign of sandwiches. The title list is endless. Meanwhile, knights start parading through the courtyard, all shining armor and elaborate plumes, hoping you'll remember who they are when it's time to hand out prizes, or at least a good seat at the feast. Your part in the festivities, looking thrilled, waving at the crowd, and pretending you understand the finer points of jousting. You're perched on a platform next to your advisors, who treat the whole event like a serious political summit, analyzing every tilt as if the fate of the kingdom depends on whether Sir Geoffrey can stay on his horse. Siblings squabble over who gets the best view, and the jester lurks nearby, just waiting for someone to fall off a saddle so he can debut his latest routine. The tournament itself is a spectacle, a heady mix of danger, bravado, and what can only be described as medieval midlife crises. The knights are out to impress, plumes bouncing, horses snorting, shields painted with terrifying family crests, or, occasionally, something that looks suspiciously like a chicken. The audience is a sea of nobles, peasants, and merchants, each with an opinion on which knight will win, which will fall, and which will spend the next week pretending not to limp. The jousts begin, and the noise is incredible. Spears splinter, armor clatters, and cheers erupt every time someone is unseated, unless it's a noble favorite, in which case the crowd lets out a collective gasp, as if the ground itself is offended. You're expected to look excited, maybe gasp politely, and never, ever laugh when a knight lands face first in the mud. It's a lot of pressure for a child who's still trying to remember which side of the platform is left. In between rounds, there are sword fights, archery displays, and the occasional wrestling match that devolves into two grown men rolling around like angry hedgehogs. You hand out favors, ribbons, tokens, or the occasional flower to your chosen champions, secretly rooting for the underdog or the knight with the best mustache. The jester keeps a running commentary, delighting the crowd with jokes about armor chafing and noble egos. Behind the spectacle, the politics are ever present. Which knights get honored? Which lords' sons are chosen for the finals? Who gets an extra portion of pie at the feast? Every decision is noted, every smile interpreted as a political move. You learn that even tournaments, supposedly a break from ruling, are just another battlefield, this time fought with lances and applause. By sunset, the winners are crowned, the losers patched up, and you are paraded back into the castle, exhausted but strangely satisfied. Watching grown men hit each other might not solve your kingdom's problems, but for a brief, muddy afternoon, it feels like the closest thing to fun you're allowed to have. And tomorrow, of course, it's back to the council chamber and your Latin homework. But for now, let the trumpets play. You survived another tournament, and so did most of your knights. If you think being a medieval child king means drifting off to sleep in a cloud of comfort, surrounded by silk and security, you might want to reconsider. Your royal bedchamber is the grandest room in the castle. Or so everyone claims. In reality, it's a cold, echoing cavern stuffed with enough drapes, furs, and tapestries to muffle a minor rebellion, but not nearly enough to keep out the drafts. Sleep, when it finally comes, is less restful bliss and more desperate negotiation. Your bed itself is legendary. A towering structure of carved wood, creaky joints, and so many feather mattresses you have to climb in with the help of a footstool and a page boy. It's piled with enough blankets to flatten a lesser child, each layer woven from the finest wool, linen, and, if the stories are true, at least one retired battle flag. You try to get comfortable, but there's always a lumpy bit under your shoulder or a cold spot just out of reach of your toes. The sheets have been aired in the icy corridor, so they're as fresh as possible and as welcoming as a bucket of snow. No sooner are you tucked in than the bedtime rituals begin. Your nurse fusses over the bed hangings, making sure every fold is straight and every shadow is banished. She checks the rushlights, the hearth, and the ever-present chamber pot, then reminds you, again, to call out if you need anything, but only if it's urgent and only if it can't wait until morning. You promise, knowing perfectly well that the last time you asked for water after midnight, 3 servants burst in with conflicting advice and a heated debate about the medicinal properties of thyme. Despite the fortress of fabric, sleep does not come easily. Every board in the room creaks, and the great stone walls seem to breathe with the cold. The window is covered with heavy drapes, but the wind finds a way to whistle through the cracks, and sometimes it sounds like a chorus of distant ghosts. Somewhere above, a mouse, possibly noble by birth, given its confidence, conducts nightly patrols across the beams. You clutch your blankets tighter. Then there are the sounds from the rest of the castle. The shuffling of guards changing shifts, the far-off clang of a gate, and the occasional yowl of a cat claiming its territory. Even the tapestries can't muffle the strange acoustics of medieval stone. Shadows from the fireplace flicker across the room, transforming your ceremonial slippers into lurking monsters and your dressing gown into the ghost of kings past. Security is a priority, at least. That's what you're told. 2 guards are posted outside your door, looking bored and slightly cold, while another paces below your window. Your nurse double-checks the locks, and your tutor leaves a book of prayers beside your bed, just in case. The implication is that no one can get in, but everyone remembers a story where someone did. Your dreams are, predictably, a jumble of lessons, processions, and the vague threat of another coronation. Sometimes you're being chased by a giant Latin grammar book, sometimes by your own crown, now grown to monstrous proportions. On rare, blissful nights, you dream of running barefoot through a sunlit meadow, a place with no drapes, no tutors, and definitely no ceremonial slippers. Morning, when it finally arrives, comes with its own set of rituals. The opening of drapes, the building of fires, and the ever-present chorus of advice about how a well-rested king is a wise king. You emerge from your bedchamber, hair askew and eyes bleary, and no one dares mention that you look less like royalty and more like someone who's just survived a mild siege. Such is royal sleep, never deep, always interrupted, and inevitably preparing you for another day of ruling with a yawn. Just when you think you might finally have the hang of this child king business, waving like a pro, giving stern looks to your siblings, and even sitting through a whole council meeting without asking when lunch is, life throws you a curveball. It's called puberty. In medieval times, it comes early, fast, and always at the least convenient moment, like, say, just before you're expected to give a speech that might end a war. Puberty doesn't care about your royal lineage or your carefully scheduled routine. One morning, you wake up and realize your voice, once sweet and clear as a choir boy's, now cracks and squeaks with all the subtlety of a goose in a windstorm. Of course, your first audience is never just your nurse or your best friend. It's the entire royal council, plus 3 foreign ambassadors and a chronicler who records every embarrassing moment for future generations. Suddenly, you're not just a king, you're a walking, talking collection of changes nobody warned you about. Your skin decides it wants to try out every rash and pimple in the medieval medical handbook. Your limbs grow at different rates, making your regal stride more of a royal stumble. The master of robes despairs at how quickly you outgrow tunics, and your new shoes pinch in all the wrong places. Your nurse mutters about growing pains, and the castle physician prescribes the same thing he prescribes for everything: leeches and a hot compress. You suspect the leeches are just for show. Everyone at court notices the changes, but nobody agrees on the right way to address them. Your mother insists it's all perfectly natural and proof you'll be a fine, strong king. Your father says it's time you learned to endure discomfort with dignity. The bishop offers a long sermon on resisting temptation, though you're mostly just tempted to scratch your nose and escape the chapel. It doesn't help that your advisors use this as an opportunity to talk about succession and heirs, words that make you want to sink into the floor. They drop hints that maybe it's time you started thinking about marriage alliances, as if there aren't enough awkward things on your mind already. Suddenly, every noble family is parading eligible daughters past your throne, each one judging you by how much you blush when you say hello. And just when you need confidence the most, your body betrays you. Important meetings are punctuated by voice cracks, and your big moment of statesmanship becomes a royal comedy of errors. You try to read a treaty aloud, only to have your voice leap an octave mid-sentence, causing the room to erupt in barely concealed snickers. The chronicler pretends not to notice, but you know tomorrow's entry will be titled, "The King's Remarkable Diplomacy and Surprising Soprano." Still, there are moments of comic relief. The jester starts imitating your voice on purpose, and you find yourself laughing along with everyone else. Your siblings tease you mercilessly, but behind closed doors, they also confess to their own disasters, broken voices, split seams, disastrous first feasts. It's a strange sort of bonding. You survive by remembering that every king before you went through the same thing. Even the legendary King Aldrich, stern and dignified in every portrait, must have once woken up to find his chin covered in mysterious fuzz. So you endure, knowing that this too will pass. With luck, your voice will settle before your next speech, and your limbs will eventually agree to the same height. Until then, you rule with as much dignity as you can muster, and keep a glass of water handy at every council meeting, just in case. If there's one thing that rivals the stress of running a medieval kingdom, it's the art of not accidentally starting a war with your pen pals. Welcome to the world of royal diplomacy, a dizzying dance of letters, gifts, and awkward alliances, all made even trickier by the fact that the only other people your age with similar problems are also child kings. It all starts with correspondence. You're taught from the moment you can hold a quill that a wise king maintains good relations abroad. So, before you're even allowed to practice your swordplay, you're practicing your signatures and learning how to address other monarchs without causing an international incident. Is it your royal cousin, your gracious majesty, or just, "Dear Charles, hope you like the goatskin"? Get it wrong, and you risk a polite but menacing reply, or worse, a cold silence that has your advisors in a panic. Your letters are, technically, your own. In reality, they're a group project. Your tutor suggests suitable phrases, the chancellor reads over your shoulder for hidden meanings, and the nurse is only interested in whether you remembered to thank the other king for the lovely jar of pickled turnips. Every sentence is carefully scrutinized. Is this too friendly, too formal, too easily misinterpreted as a challenge to single combat? Diplomatic gifts are their own headache. You receive presents from distant courts, elaborate toys, rare animals, tapestries featuring scenes you don't quite understand. The pressure is on to send something of equal or greater value in return. If you pick wrong, you risk insulting a powerful neighbor, or worse, getting stuck with a live monkey for the next 3 years. Once, you sent a box of gingerbread to a boy king in Bohemia, only to hear he was allergic. There were rumors of retaliation in the form of a mysterious cheese wheel sent your way. Occasionally, you actually meet your counterparts, usually at great feasts or when a wedding alliance is being negotiated. These encounters are a mix of stiff introductions, competitive courtesy, and silent games of who can stay awake the longest during another bishop's speech. You eye each other warily across the table, each hoping the other will make the first blunder. You can't help but wonder if they, too, have tutors drilling them on diplomatic smiles and the proper way to avoid an accidental declaration of war. Language barriers don't make things easier. Half the time, you're working through translators. Stiff, bearded men who turn your joke about the weather into a cryptic proverb. A simple compliment about someone's crown might be relayed as, "His Majesty admires your strategic positioning near the river." Suddenly, negotiations stall until someone clarifies you meant the hat, not a plan to invade their borders. Of course, alliances and treaties are forged through these awkward exchanges. You sign agreements you only partly understand, swap tokens of eternal friendship, and smile for portraits you'll never see. Each successful treaty feels like surviving a riddle told by an especially cranky sphinx. And if you're lucky, you might actually make a friend. Someone who understands what it's like to have the weight of a kingdom on your skinny shoulders, to be told you're wise beyond your years when you'd rather just go fishing. Occasionally, you and your fellow monarchs manage to sneak in a game of chess, a race in the garden, or a secret exchange of riddles, proof that even future rulers crave a little mischief. In the end, foreign diplomacy as a child king is equal parts theatre, chess match, and group therapy. You learn quickly that sometimes the best way to keep the peace is just to write a polite thank you, send a well-chosen gift, and hope nobody sends you another live monkey. Nothing says, "You're a king now," like being asked to sit perfectly still while a stranger in strange shoes tries to immortalize your face in paint and maybe judge your posture at the same time. Welcome to the peculiar, high-pressure world of royal portraiture, where smiling isn't just encouraged, it's a survival skill. It starts with a summons. One morning, just when you think you might have a day off from council meetings, the Master of Protocol announces, "Today, Your Majesty, the painter arrives." There is no escape. You're marched into a chamber that smells of oils, pigments, and a certain despair that only comes from standing for hours in a scratchy outfit. The artist, always a mysterious figure from a far-off city, bows low and starts unpacking a collection of odd brushes and glass jars, each more suspicious-looking than the last. Preparation is an ordeal. Your hair is fussed over, your best robes are squeezed onto your growing limbs, and there's an extended argument about whether you should wear the ceremonial sword, which, for the record, you can barely lift. The crown is placed on your head with great ceremony, and you're reminded, repeatedly, not to slouch, even though the seat feels like it's been specifically designed to encourage it. Then comes the hardest part, holding the royal expression. You're supposed to look wise, dignified, and serene, like someone who could settle a border dispute while solving a riddle and balancing the budget. In reality, your cheeks itch, your foot falls asleep, and your eyes keep wandering to the window, where page boys are playing an extremely tempting game of stickball. Every time your smile falters, the painter clucks disapprovingly, and the master of robes threatens to fetch your tutor for a lecture on legacy. The artist starts sketching, pausing every few minutes to squint, adjust the light, and remind you not to blink. You wonder if the pose is supposed to convey regal confidence, or if it's simply a medieval endurance test. Minutes turn to hours. You try to think kingly thoughts, but keep coming back to the pressing question of when lunch will arrive. You hope it's soon. The jester sneaks in and tries to make you laugh. The artist glares, and the jester is banished again. The whole court is invested in the outcome. A good portrait means you'll be remembered as a strong, handsome ruler, a credit to your lineage. A bad one, and your enemies will have fresh material for decades. "Look at those ears," they'll whisper. "Wasn't he the one whose portrait looked like a startled goat?" The chronicler stands nearby, jotting down notes, ready to record the dignified sitting, or, if things go wrong, the great fainting incident of the year. The session finally ends. You're stiff, hungry, and deeply relieved, but it's not over. Now comes the reveal. A tense moment when everyone gathers around the canvas and tries very hard to look impressed. "What a noble brow," someone says. "Such intensity in the eyes," says another, carefully avoiding the unfortunate way your nose seems to have tripled in size. The portrait will hang for generations, looming over banquet halls and council chambers, silently judging your descendants. If you're lucky, it looks enough like you that your legacy survives with dignity. If not, well, at least your enemies will have something to gossip about. So, you learn to smile for the painter as if your very life depends on it. Because, in the world of medieval monarchy, sometimes it actually does. After all, a king is only as memorable as his best portrait. And hopefully, a little better looking. Being a medieval child, king comes with a crown, a scepter, and a royal catch. There's a strong chance you won't be allowed to rule by yourself, at least not until you can grow a proper moustache. or successfully sit through an entire church service without fidgeting. That's where the Regency comes in. A system designed to ensure responsible adults handle things while you theoretically focus on your education, your health, and not swallowing the signet ring. A regency, in theory, is a temporary arrangement. In practice, it's a high-stakes game of political roulette. Which adult will end up running the kingdom? Sometimes it's your mother, sometimes a scheming uncle, occasionally a trusted noble, red, least threatening, and just as often, the person who happened to be standing closest when the previous regent retired unexpectedly. Your first sign that you're not really in charge is the sudden explosion of paperwork. Documents once addressed to you now come stamped by order of the Regency Council. Decrees get read aloud, discussed, and approved at meetings you aren't invited to, or, if you are, you're politely asked to sit in the corner and practice your penmanship. All in good time, Your Majesty, they say, as your royal education is ramped up to include long lectures on patience and the value of humility. Meanwhile, the court enters a new era of cautious plotting. Your would-be regents are everywhere, each trying to look supportive while quietly counting down the days until you're old enough. Or, depending on the level of ambition in the room, too old to matter. Alliances shift with the weather. Today's wise counselor can become tomorrow's scapegoat, and every adult seems to be quietly auditioning for the role of power behind the throne. Your regent is supposed to act in your best interest, but it's remarkable how often your best interest means their best interest. Maybe your mother insists on doubling your language lessons so you'll be ready to rule. Your uncle claims the treasury is too empty for new horses but full enough for a grand hunting lodge right next to his own lands. Sometimes the regent is actually kind and capable, steering the kingdom through storms. Other times, the regent is a professional bureaucrat whose hobbies include inventing new taxes and updating the dress code for council meetings. For you, the days are a mix of frustration and confusion. One moment, you're told you're the hope of the realm. The next, you're shooed out of the council chamber so the grown-ups can discuss matters of state. Every important decision is out of your hands, from troop movements to feast menus, though you do get to choose the embroidery on your next set of bed linens. The worst part? No one can tell you exactly when the regency will end. Some regents are in a hurry to hand over the keys to the kingdom the minute your voice cracks. Others discover a new crisis every year that somehow requires just a little more adult supervision. The court gossips keep score, betting on which birthday will finally mark your real ascension. Yet, regency isn't all doom and boredom. Sometimes you manage to use it to your advantage, feigning ignorance when convenient, slipping out of tedious lessons, or watching the grown-ups squabble and learning more about power than any tutor could teach you. Eventually, the day comes when you're deemed ready, whether you actually are or not. The regent steps aside, or is pushed, and the kingdom braces itself as you step forward, older, wiser, and with a list of ideas you've been saving for years. That's Regency Roulette, a waiting game with high stakes, shifting alliances, and the chance to prove that, one day, you really can rule, and hopefully, with fewer embroidery decisions. Every day, as a medieval child, king feels like you're living someone else's grown-up life, wearing the crown, giving the orders, signing the decrees. But the day comes, inevitably, when the childhood part falls away and the royal part is all that's left. If you're lucky and careful, you'll actually make it to adulthood with most of your wits, and maybe even a few of your original teeth. The signs come slowly. One morning, you notice you're no longer the shortest at the council table. Or maybe you can finally buckle your own sword without a page boy's help. Your tutors switch from tales of long-lost kingdoms to urgent lessons on balancing ledgers and choosing the right allies. The feasts get longer, the debates more serious, and the weight of the crown, which never really fit, feels like it's finally molding to your head. By now, You've survived more than you ever expected. You've outlasted regents with too many opinions, endured council meetings that could bore a brick wall, and watched more tournaments than you care to remember. You've learned to sniff out the difference between a friendly gesture and a political trap, and you've come to realize that a loyal dog, a clever page boy, or a sister who occasionally returns your stolen slippers can be more valuable than any jeweled scepter. The transformation from child to king isn't marked by a single event, but by 100 small moments. The first time you challenge an advisor's suggestion and win. The first time you offer mercy rather than punishment. The first time your word is taken seriously, not because you wear the crown, but because you've earned it. You look back at the boy who dreaded speaking in public, who fumbled with his fork and struggled to stay awake during genealogical lectures, and you realize how much you've changed and how much you still pretend not to care what the chronicler writes about your haircut. Adulthood as a royal is both freedom and responsibility. Less you can do whatever you want. More you are now responsible for everything, including the weather, the wheat harvest, and the general mood of the population. Your mistakes become lessons for others, and your victories are rarely just your own. You learn that everyone, advisors, rivals, even the castle cook, will judge your reign by how you handle the inevitable disasters. The failed crops, the plague, the grumbling barons, and the cousins who still think they could do your job better. Yet, if you survive your childhood, you carry with you a strange resilience. You know how to laugh at absurdity, how to spot danger in a smile, and how to sneak a second piece of honey cake at the feast without anyone noticing. You remember the nights you couldn't sleep, the games of chess that were really lessons in war, and the morning when you woke up and realized you weren't a child anymore. Not every medieval child king made it this far. The history books are full of stories of those who didn't. Kings who lost their crowns, their kingdoms, or simply their patience with the endless parade of etiquette and expectation. But if you do survive, you become something extraordinary, a ruler shaped by hardship, sharpened by caution, and seasoned by the pure, ridiculous persistence of youth. So here's to the end of childhood, and to the beginning of something even harder, ruling, wisely, bravely, and, if possible, with your sense of humor intact. Because you'll need it. You'd think that as a medieval child king, having pets would be a simple joy. A chance to escape from court politics and council meetings for a little bit of fun. But in the world of royalty, nothing is ever just simple. And not even the family dog is immune from diplomatic implications or the latest palace gossip. Welcome to the royal menagerie. Your very own collection of animals, each one chosen for its rarity, its ferocity, or simply because your advisor thought it would impress a visiting ambassador. Every king needs to prove his power, and nothing says, "Look at me. I'm important," quite like having a peacock strut through the banquet hall or a pair of monkeys performing tricks in the courtyard. Of course, there are the classics: hounds for hunting, falcons for showing off, and a stable of horses with pedigrees longer than most nobles' family trees. But these aren't just ordinary pets. The royal menagerie is a living symbol of status, wealth, and a sort of medieval one-upmanship. If your cousin, the Duke of Somewhere, manages to import a leopard, you can bet your steward will immediately write to distant lands for a baby bear, or, at the very least, an oversized lizard. No one wants to be the king with the dullest beast in the kingdom. Your pet becomes a centerpiece at feasts, a diplomatic gift. And, on a bad day, the reason the cook resigns after finding paw prints in the pudding. Of course, the more exotic the animal, the bigger the headache. Peacocks may look glamorous in portraits, but they shriek like banshees at sunrise and will happily snack on anything shiny, including the royal signet ring if you're not careful. The monkeys are adorable until they escape and make off with your crown during a visiting envoy's speech. The bear cub, a gift from a foreign sultan, seems cute until it doubles in size and starts eyeing the family silverware. Someone always has a story about a lion escaping its cage and ending up in the Queen Mother's solar. You hope it's just a legend. Taking care of these animals falls to the royal keepers, a ragtag group of handlers who claim to be experts but mostly just hope for the best. Feeding time is a performance, requiring raw meat for the carnivores, special grain for the rare birds, and bribes of honey for anything big enough to argue. There's a strict protocol for who gets to pet what, and an even stricter one for who has to clean up after the elephants. Yes, occasionally there's an elephant, and yes, the castle moat will never be the same. Exotic pets are also political assets and liabilities. Presenting a visitor with a well-trained falcon shows off your kingdom's wealth and sophistication. Accidentally gifting them a snake with a taste for velvet slippers, less so. Every creature is a statement, and every mishap is a potential scandal. If an ambassador's child gets nipped by the royal lynx, expect a flurry of angry letters and at least one official apology. Despite the chaos, there are moments of real delight. A puppy's loyalty, a falcon's flight, or a monkey's perfectly timed distraction during a boring ceremony can brighten your royal days. But you learn quickly. Never turn your back on a parrot with a grudge. Always count the monkeys before dinner. And keep your favorite slippers well out of reach. In the royal menagerie, every animal has a role to play. And every day is an adventure in animal management, diplomatic tightropes, and the unending quest to have the kingdom's most memorable and least disastrous collection of pets. The castle, towering symbol of royal power, home to priceless tapestries, and, as you quickly discover, the single draftiest place in the entire kingdom. From the outside, it's all grandeur, stone towers, fluttering banners, and sturdy gates built to withstand any army. From the inside, it's a never-ending battle against the elements, and the elements are winning. Let's start with your throne room, the crown jewel of medieval architecture, and, coincidentally, the coldest spot for 50 miles in any direction. Sunlight glitters through narrow windows high in the walls, but good luck feeling its warmth. The best you can hope for is a faint beam illuminating a dust mote or two. The windows are too small to let in any real sun, but perfectly designed to funnel icy winds directly at your royal ankles. If you sit too long on the throne, you risk fusing to the seat with a thin layer of frost. The tapestries look impressive, all golden lions and heroic ancestors, but they're less insulation and more wall decoration. No matter how many layers you're wearing, tunic, surcoat, cloak, and the ceremonial blanket they pretend is a cape, the cold still finds you. The stone floors are always freezing, so you shuffle around in slippers lined with last year's marten fur, quietly envying the peasant children who run barefoot on dirt and probably have warmer toes. Fireplaces, in theory, should make things better. In reality, they are medieval optimism in brick form. The hearth is grand and always stoked, but most of the heat shoots straight up the chimney, giving the passing crows a free sauna while you huddle on your throne. Courtiers strategically place themselves as close to the fire as possible, leaving everyone else to practice regal stillness and pretend they're not shivering. You try to look dignified, but your knees clatter out a drumbeat of discontent during every ceremony. The rest of the castle is little better. Corridors are long, lined with stone that holds the chill even in July. The wind howls through the arrow slits, whistling tunelessly while your nurse bundles you in yet another scarf. Bedrooms are no warmer, just smaller. Your blankets are legendary, but so are the icicles that form on the window ledges. In winter, your breath fogs the air and you debate sleeping in your fur-lined ceremonial cape. You have done it more than once. Occasionally, someone suggests clever fixes. Straw mats on the floor, which the dogs chew to bits, extra tapestries, now with twice as many heroic ancestors, or even warming pans, metal trays full of coals, hurried across your bed by a page boy in a panic. The effect lasts 5 minutes. After that, it's back to chattering teeth and pretending your feet haven't gone numb. Council meetings become tests of endurance. No one dares suggest ending early for fear of seeming weak, but everyone invents new business to conduct near the fire. The jester gets the warmest spot, simply because laughter, it turns out, is the best defense against hypothermia. Yet for all the discomfort, there's something weirdly comforting about it. The cold keeps you alert, the drafts give you stories to tell, and every shiver is a reminder that even kings can't command the weather. So you sit on your chilly throne, wrapped in royal dignity and 3 layers of wool, and try not to envy the sheep. In the end, a castle isn't just a fortress, it's a rite of passage. If you can survive the cold, you can survive anything your kingdom throws at you, or at least anything that isn't a snowball from your mischievous siblings. Nothing says you're king now like being loaded onto a horse, bundled into ceremonial robes, and paraded through the streets while your entire kingdom turns out to stare and judge. On paper, a royal parade should be the highlight of your reign. Cheering crowds, music, banners, and endless gifts from loyal subjects. In reality, it's a marathon of forced smiles, stiff waves, and a constant, gnawing paranoia that you'll do something deeply embarrassing in front of everyone who matters. The preparation alone is exhausting. Your advisors spend weeks planning the route, consulting oracles and chicken entrails to predict good weather and the least dangerous neighborhoods. You're fitted for yet another set of robes, this one heavier, scratchier, and far more flammable than any you've worn before. The royal hairdresser works overtime, and there are more last-minute discussions about which hat to wear than about next year's tax policy. The day of the parade dawns too early. You're bundled into your finery and wedged onto a horse. Side saddle, because it looks more dignified, Your Majesty, while an army of handlers fuss over every last detail. The saddle is uncomfortable, the horse seems as nervous as you are, and you silently hope the animal doesn't get any ideas about expressing itself in front of the main crowd. As you set off, trumpets blare and the crowds erupt. You wave, trying to project royal confidence, but it's hard to feel powerful when you're half smothered by a velvet cape and your right arm is going numb. The streets are packed with townsfolk, peasants craning for a glimpse, merchants hawking snacks, and noble families jostling for a spot in the front row. Everyone is watching, and everyone, you're convinced, is just waiting for you to slip, sneeze, or fall off your horse. There's always an undercurrent of anxiety. Your advisors have drilled you on parade risks, sudden noises, projectiles, flowers if you're lucky, cabbages if you're not, and, most terrifying of all, rogue jesters who delight in popping up at the worst moments to lighten the mood. Secret Service types lurk in the crowd, eyes darting, while you try to remember who to nod at and when. And let's not forget the gifts. Children run forward with garlands, bakers present enormous, unwieldy loaves of bread, and there's always one enterprising merchant who tries to slip you a live goose. You must thank everyone graciously, keep your composure, and never let the goose see your fear. The protocol is clear. Whatever happens, you smile and wave. Every parade, of course, is another opportunity for the chronicler to record your bearing, for the gossips to analyze your complexion, and for your siblings to mock your posture for months afterward. If you stumble, you do it with great poise. If your horse misbehaves, you mastered the situation with youthful vigor. You learn quickly that the parade is less about you and more about everyone else's expectations, about reassuring the realm that their king is strong, healthy, and unflappable, or at the very least, upright. By the end of the route, you're exhausted, sore, and secretly relieved to escape the crush of eyes. Back inside the castle, you peel off the robes, brush hay from your hair, and vow to invent a better system for next time. But as you catch your breath, you realize you survived another public ordeal, and the kingdom survived you. That, in the medieval world, is cause for a real celebration, one that doesn't require waving for 3 hours straight. Being a medieval child king might sound glamorous, but nobody ever mentions the paperwork. Forget about epic quests or dragon slaying. Most days you'll find yourself knee-deep in royal decrees, trade agreements, and legal notices about sheep trespassing. Welcome to the world of medieval bureaucracy, where the most powerful object in the realm isn't your sword or crown, it's your royal seal. And everyone wants a piece of it. The day starts innocently enough. After breakfast, you're presented with a stack of parchment that could easily hide a small horse. Each scroll is accompanied by a long-winded explanation from a court scribe who is, somehow, both impossibly old and endlessly enthusiastic about proper documentation. The Chancellor is always hovering nearby, eager to explain why the Treaty of Wheat Exportation, Article 12, subsection B, absolutely must have your signature before lunch. Your signature, incidentally, takes so long to write that you're beginning to develop a cramp in your royal wrist. But signing your name is just the beginning. Every important document needs the official royal seal, a heavy stamp kept under lock and key, and watched over by at least 3 suspicious-looking advisors at all times. Applying the seal is an ordeal in itself. First, a scribe heats a blob of wax until it smells like scorched sheep. Then you carefully press the engraved stamp, making sure not to smudge it, mess it up, and you have to start over. The pressure is real. Nobody wants to be the king who accidentally approves a new festival of fish guts because of a seal gone sideways. The bureaucracy doesn't end there. Any law, order, or even mildly important suggestion needs to be copied by hand, sometimes in triplicate, by a team of clerks who seem to multiply every time you look away. Each copy is then checked, cross-checked, and read aloud at council meetings so everyone can argue over the placement of a comma. You'd think ruling was about making decisions. In reality, it's about reviewing paperwork on the breeding rights of pigs in the northern provinces. Even the smallest matters are documented. Did you grant a peasant permission to build a shed? There's a form for that. Allowed your cousin to borrow a book from the Royal Library? Form. Changed your mind about Tuesday's pudding? 3 forms, 2 signatures, and a witness from the pantry staff. The chronicler gleefully records every notable proclamation, while the court jester suggests a new decree. An end to decrees. You're almost tempted. The worst part is the language. Legal Latin, endless flourishes, and terminology so dense, even your most learned advisor gets lost. Be it known on this day, in the reign of His Serene and Most Elevated Majesty, that the petition to regulate the bell-ringing schedule, by the 3rd clause, your mind is drifting to lunch. Heaven forbid you make a mistake, one wrong word, and the sheep farmers are rioting because of a misunderstood tax on fleeces. Every advisor insists their document is urgent. Some sneak extra clauses into the footnotes, hoping you won't notice. Once, you signed a decree that accidentally gave your nurse control over the Royal Guard's laundry schedule. She's never let you forget it. And just when you think you're done, a fresh pile arrives. The scribe sighs, the wax is reheated, and the whole cycle begins again. Still, every seal you stamp, every scroll you sign, brings a little more order to your chaotic kingdom. Or at least, it keeps your advisors busy enough to leave you alone for a precious half hour. Welcome to bureaucracy, Your Majesty, a nightmare made of parchment, but one you'll rule over with ink-stained hands. Every child plays at spies, but as a medieval child king, you live it. Forget secret handshakes and treehouse passwords. Your daily life is a complicated game of whispers, coded glances, and double agents, some of whom are disturbingly good at pretending to be your friend. In the royal castle, everyone is watching everyone, and trust is a luxury you can't afford. not even with your teddy bear. It starts innocently enough. You notice that whenever you mention a craving for honey cakes, 3 different advisors bring them the next day, each claiming the idea was entirely their own. The page boys, once happy to race sticks in the courtyard, now compete to be the first to report on your whereabouts. Even your nurse, that ever-present guardian of bedtime and scraped knees, has a habit of passing along your moods to the Queen Mother with suspicious efficiency. Spying is baked into the castle walls, almost as much as the drafts. The cooks gossip in the kitchens, the stable boys whisper in the hayloft, and the chambermaids carry tales from one end of the corridor to the other with the speed and subtlety of a flock of startled doves. What starts as innocent chit-chat quickly becomes intelligence, passed up the chain to whichever advisor is currently most in favor. Your tutors, those supposed keepers of knowledge and discipline, are masters at gathering information. "How did you enjoy your lesson on the history of tariffs, Your Majesty?" they ask, a little too eagerly. You realize they're not just interested in your progress, they're collecting hints about your interests, weaknesses, and potential allies among the staff. The Master of Robes even claims to have invented a new system for organizing your clothes, but you're pretty sure he's just cataloging which socks you prefer in case it becomes relevant during a council vote. It doesn't stop with the adults. Your fellow children are just as crafty. Siblings, cousins, and even supposed friends are all potential spies in training. You catch your little sister accidentally wandering near your study, eyes wide and pockets suspiciously full of note scraps. Sometimes you swear even your dog is reporting on your activities. The hound always seems to appear after you've snuck a snack, tail wagging in a way that feels far too knowing. Of course, the real professionals are the so-called confidants, the ones assigned to guard your secrets. These are the advisors who claim to care only for your well-being, but who always seem to have a private audience with the regent after every heart-to-heart. You test their loyalty with little tricks, sharing false rumors, inventing secret plans, and watching to see how long it takes before the gossip comes echoing back from the council chamber. Spoiler, it's never very long. Even your beloved teddy bear, a gift from a distant aunt, stuffed with straw and stitched with care, can't escape suspicion. You once found a page boy dusting it, though he claimed he was checking for moths. For all you know, it's stuffed with secret messages or, worse, listening devices, which haven't been invented yet, but you wouldn't put it past the court wizard. In the end, you learn to guard your words, keep your true opinions hidden, and dole out trust in tiny, careful increments. You play your own games, sending false trails and cryptic notes, sometimes just to see who will take the bait. The only place you feel truly safe is behind a locked door, with the dog asleep at your feet and the teddy bear keeping silent vigil. Such is the royal spy game. A web of loyalty, lies, and constant uncertainty. If you can survive the politics of the nursery, the council chamber will be easy. Maybe. So as you drift off tonight, tucked in under your soft blankets, maybe with a snack that isn't laced with medieval herbs, and definitely no poisoned pudding, take a quiet moment to appreciate your incredible good luck. You survived another day without a regency crisis, and nobody demanded your official seal before breakfast. Just imagine. Centuries ago, some poor child was crowned king before he could spell his own name. Dressed in clothes so itchy they doubled as security alarms, surrounded by advisors who smiled like hungry wolves and relatives who kept suggesting just a quick cup of wine before bed. They grew up under a pile of expectations, in a world where bedtime stories were cautionary tales about betrayal and the family pets were probably plotting their own coups. Tonight, as you relax in your clean, peaceful room, maybe whisper a thank you to those tiny, terrified kings who paved the way for modern life, not with great wisdom, but with sheer stubbornness and the occasional lucky dodge of a poisoned pear. Remember, history isn't just a parade of famous names. It's also a comedy of mistakes, accidents, and children in oversized crowns just trying to stay warm and avoid being temporarily replaced by Uncle Ralph. So next time you're tempted to complain about a boring Zoom meeting or a cold cup of coffee, remember, you're not ruling a kingdom before puberty, and your biggest worry probably isn't whether your cousin is plotting a coup. You are the descendant of survivors, people who lived through lice, leeches, and enough family drama to power 3 soap operas. That's something worth celebrating. And now, let the worries of the day drift away, like rumors in a drafty medieval hallway. You're safe, you're warm, and nobody's asking you to approve a tax increase before breakfast. Good night, sleep well, and long may you reign in comfort.